Let us pray. Gracious Father, we pray for your holy Catholic Church. Fill it with all truth, in all truth with all peace. Where it is corrupt, purify it. Where it is in error, direct it. Where in anything it is amiss, reform it. Where it is right, strengthen it. Where it is in want, provide for it. Where it is divided, reunite it. For the sake of Jesus Christ, your Son, our Savior. Amen. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord God, King of the universe, for you provide all things in heaven and on earth. Bless this meeting. Bless all who care for this church. Bless our congregation and sustain it. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Let us bless the Lord. Thanks be to God. Could I see James Lewis for a second? I need a technical support to provide sound to my sound and sight to my iPad. Yeah. Projectors, yeah. Video. Yeah. Did everyone get the handouts here? If you didn't, raise your hand and we'll make sure that you get handouts. Later. Yes, sir. What's that? Yes. I can't hear you, Freddie. Yes. All right. Freddie Ewell has requested a point of order, and his point of order is that since there are 4 people on the ballot presently to fulfill 4 positions, that we elect them by acclamation. Is there a motion to that effect? So moved. Second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and begin my report. And do we have, Doug, let's see, do we have the 4 candidates here? All right, Susan, stand up, please. Come forward, all 4. Douglas, are you here? Yes. Bryant McGann, and our 4th, Linda Lewis. Are you right here? 2 from 8 o'clock, 2 from 10:15, 2 long-term, 2 newer. It just couldn't get better than that. Thank you all for serving on the vestry. Well, I'm going to step back to the screen. The screen is, I am not going to use the screen except for one moment in which I will step back. So do not fear. This is the State of the Parish Report, December 14th, 2014. And we will go to a brief video. All right, then we won't go to the screen at all, which will save some time. Okay. Just take a moment to be settled. Christ in St. Luke seeks to be an open and engaged community which fosters reasoned Christianity within the Anglican tradition. This is the parish mission statement set forth by the vestry in the winter of 2012. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. All right. In addition, the vestry set forth a second statement that encapsulated how we were to go about addressing this mission statement. We will provide caring hospitality and strategic outreach, inspiring preaching, insightful teaching, and awe-inspiring liturgical and musical experiences that connect mind to heart and the gospel to the world. Guided by these two statements, which were initially bolstered by input from you, the congregation, your leadership moved forward. In addition, there are essential core values of the parish, which were going to be on the screen, but that particular apparatus has been borrowed, so I will not show it. But the essential core values of the parish were outlined and enshrined on the parish website, and I encourage you to go to christandstluke's.org, and summarized in a welcome video, which I made about a year ago. As a result of these statements and our clear and defining core values, we began a process of determining our passion and priorities as a congregation and what drives our greatest satisfaction. It was clear that we are a parish that values traditional music and worship, wedded to the gospel and framed in a contemporary message. We value diversity, have a passion for the marginalized, and take seriously the sustainability of this fragile earth, our island home. And over the last few years, we have also grown in our ability to welcome newcomers, as evidenced by the balance on our vestry between those who have been a part of this parish for years and those who arrived within the past few years, but bring gifts and experience that you have determined are valuable to the parish. Our mission, strategy, and values led to the transformative calls of Kevin Kwan. Where's Kevin? Right here. And Grant Stokes. Are you here, Grant? Well, we'll applaud him anyway. Grant is being host to our visiting priest. In 2013, not 1913, just a little humor. Two young men who represent the best in music and preaching, respectively. In addition, Susan Nakigan, as office manager, is quickly taking over many of the duties of parish administrator, including that of property administrator, and has made a real impact on the day-to-day working of the parish. Kevin continues to expand and develop our music program as he builds on the solid foundation of his predecessors in making Christ in St. Luke's the foremost center for sacred music in the region. The bishop, in an aside the other day, told me that this parish tops the list in music and worship in the diocese, and he considers us his unofficial cathedral. The rector of Bruton Parish in Williamsburg told me at clergy conference, and Bruton Parish is the largest congregation in the diocese, told me he wanted to steal Kevin for Bruton. Grant has continued to build a young adults program that is welcoming, pastorally supportive, and setting the foundation for a new generation of leadership in the church. Over the last year, he's managed major funerals as well as diocesan, regional, and ecumenical services here, and opened our church twice to the community of young people when faced with the two tragic suicides of students this past year. And one of the evidence of the power of that young adults community is that Aidan Patrone is our new coordinator of our Norfolk Emergency Shelter Team Week, which will begin the end of this month. Aidan, are you here? She went home. The retirement within 2 weeks of one another of Joyce Safford as business manager and Charlie Davry as coordinator of Christian education for children, as well as pastoral care, have brought challenges and opportunity. Challenges because our parish grows in ministry and complexity, but the staff is the smallest this parish has had in 70 years. We do more with less. That means every staff member multitasks. Yet experience tells me that we need to be very strategic about how we move ahead with staffing our church. A staff profile that worked in the 1990s when Charlie and Joyce were hired may not work as we move deep into this new century. We're managing our business life on a short-term basis with a combination of Jane Dembert, who works 2 days a week to manage our cash flow, Jason Lawrence, a CPA and a payroll company, and a lot of hands-on work for our amazing treasurer, Kelly Dickerson. Kelly, would you stand right there? Thank you for all your work. And our new associate treasurer, Melissa Thrasher West. Where are you, Melissa? Are you here? Right there. Yay, Melissa. Works with the Yacht Club in their finance office. A committee chaired by Susan Leidy of the Finance Committee is monitoring the effectiveness of this interim process. On very short notice, Stacy Fitzwater and Amanda Ipock. Are they here? Stacy, Amanda? They are not. Amanda, where are you? Yay! Supported by Jennifer Palmer, Aaron Phillips, Linda Cherry, Barbara Ewell, Lydia Netzer, Grant and me jumped into the breach to launch the Fall Children's Program. They recruited volunteers, spearheaded the renovation of our youth room, added additional furnishings to our children's spaces, making them more multi-age, and organized a remarkable program. They did an amazing job, and they continue to work very hard during this interim period, and we owe them a tremendous debt of thanks. In the midst of these challenges, left by 2 significant retirements, there are lots of opportunities as well. Times of transition lead us into a wilderness, but wilderness, Scripture tells us, liminal spaces where we're betwixt and between, offer actually the opportunity for creativity, dreaming, experimentation, and new life. As nerve-wracking as these times are, they are also exciting, energetic, and rife with possibility as long as we can manage our anxiety, be open to the new, keep in touch, and not be afraid to make mistakes while learning from them without blame. Even contained chaos at such times can become the womb of new life. Science teaches that. The group with no name, this fall my wife Kathy shared with me a vision and a dream she had for creating a program to increase volunteerism in the parish. She opined that there could be a cadre of people who were available to volunteer for 1 or 2 short-term activities while gathering regularly to have fun and build community. So she set out to make this happen. The first gathering in August drew almost 50 people for wine and refreshments. Very good tactic. Out of that came a community of women, primarily, who have already served as hosts for visitors coming in from the Stockley Gardens Arts Festival, provided support to Leanne Avery and Betty Deniston in parish receptions, welcomed and guided representatives of the Lutherans, Episcopalians, Roman Catholics, and Methodists as they gathered here for the opener of their state convention a couple weeks ago, supported Langhorne Porter in the Ministry of Food, and volunteered to help with the upcoming children's Christmas pageant. Water for Haiti. Living out the mission to provide strategic outreach, our Caring for Creation ministry embarked on an ambitious project over the last year and a half to provide water for Haiti. Paul Clancy researched and Joan Atkinson guided to locate a highly respected NGO in Haiti where we might partner in building a sustainable well for a community without potable water. Our Caring for Creation group involved the whole parish and all ages in raising the $15,000 needed for this project. And in September, Paul, David DeRica, and Norris McLean traveled to Haiti to celebrate its completion. We owe them some applause and thanks. So there's more to tell, but this is where we've been in a nutshell. Where are we going, and what are the challenges we face? We face four. One is hospitality. As volunteer newcomer coordinator, Bev Rayner has done yeoman's work in creating an enthusiastic process for welcoming newcomers. But we still have a ways to go, as Bev has noted, and I agree. Feedback from many of our newcomers reveals that this is not an easy parish in which to find a place, your place, unless you are aggressive. We are challenged to move beyond welcome to incorporation, particularly of those younger families with children and less disposable time. We need to empower our congregation so that everyone is involved in welcoming the stranger and helping them to feel at home. Second challenge, communication. Communication in such a complex and busy culture demands time and attention. Thanks to Jane Cleary. Is Jane here? She is not. Who for a tiny stipend has spent countless hours reshaping our website, the website we're about to launch, in our next step in a more user-friendly style that will provide a members portal. Such an addition will offer a photo directory, online giving, and other benefits for our membership. Susan Nakigan has been working hard to update and restructure our parish database, which she discovered was never set up correctly to begin with a number of years ago, and thus has been only marginally useful. But we need to take the next step with communication, and that means staffing. All of our advisors say that in order to manage it effectively, we need to have at least a part-time dedicated staff person to oversee communication. It has become too complex for volunteers to manage. It also means helping the congregation use the communication tools. For example, many do not yet realize that there is a wealth of information on our private parish Facebook page, of which over 300 people are a part, or that we have a treasury of past sermons, services, and classes on our parish YouTube site, thanks to the countless hours of Jamie Lewis, who has spent tremendous time videoing, formatting, and posting. And Jamie, where are you? Behind the camera. Thank you, Jamie. Third challenge, giving. Our third challenge is to raise our base of giving. While we have made huge strides in raising our giving under the leadership of Mike McClellan and Priscilla Rohde, and through your generous support, and I applaud all of you for your support of this church, we still live a relatively hand-to-mouth parish existence. For example, grants compensation has been provided by one generous donor these past 2 years. That gift will cease in 2015. At present, giving is behind where it was last year at this time, so we may need to redesignate funds allotted for a Christian education director to Grant's salary and hope that pledges come in to provide compensation for both. That jury's still out, but it would be a great loss not to have a Christian education director that we pay and can be a full professional in running that. If you have not made a pledge or have the ability to increase your pledge for 2015, it would be extremely helpful. This is the year. Fourth, Christian formation and education for children and youth. This brings me to the crux of our challenge and vision for 2015, and I'm going to close on this, I promise. The faith and values formation of our children and youth and their education in the Christian faith experienced through the lens of the Anglican tradition in which our Episcopal Church is planted. Most parents I know have little understanding of this Anglican tradition of Christianity, the values it shapes in the lives of young people, and why we at Christ and St. Luke's want our children's faith to be shaped by this particular tradition and not just any tradition. Most adult Episcopalians have grown up in other traditions and find their way to the Episcopal Church through marriage, a love of the worship, because of our social conscience, or as a refuge from harsher, more judgmental expressions of Christianity. If you come from another tradition in the Episcopal Church, raise your hand so you can see how many. Thank you. Because they have been shaped in other denominations and other denominational expressions of Christianity, many adult Episcopalians can spout the Methodist or Roman Catholic, the Presbyterian or Baptist ways more easily than the Episcopal. Therefore, most parents, and Kathy and I were included, are just happy if their child wants or is willing to go to church, any church, without thought as to what values and beliefs or interpretation of Scripture or social values that particular church or young or youth religious movement is filling their child. At the same time, we Episcopalians have not invested the time and resources in our children and youth as have, say, the Presbyterians or Roman Catholics or Young Life. They provide full-time dedicated staff for these ministries, supplemented by a large cadre of enthusiastic volunteers and strong parental support. It is so easy to mistake form for substance. The Episcopal Church, in my estimation, has the right substance, but when it comes to investing time and money and priority in the faith formation of our children and the setting of values for the rest of their life, we neglect the kind of forms that will communicate and make a difference in their understanding of the true nature of the gospel as we understand it in the Anglican tradition in the Episcopal Church. As your rector, I am going to do my best to change that, and I invite you to join me. I am going to take a hands-on approach. I'm going to make this coming year children and youth formation a top priority for my time. That will take me away from other things, but it is going to be a top priority, and I hope you will join me. I am in conversation, as is Grant, with our present staff and teachers and Ken and Caroline Black to explore different ways of experimenting and reshaping our program to fit best the realities and lifestyles of our families. However, I want to be perfectly clear, to quote Nixon, that Christian formation begins at home. We parents, we can't do it for you. We can support you and help you, and we will provide the best Christian formation we can with the resources you provide. But we've got to determine as a community whether this is really important to us, and I will tell you that it is important to me, and our children, our youth, are absolutely vital, and we've got to make an impact in their lives and through them on this world, because I think the Episcopal Church and the Anglican tradition, it carries the future of Christianity. I feel that with every bone in my body. I am also looking, therefore, during this interim time, for an experienced teacher to serve as a Sunday superintendent to help me recruit experienced teachers and others who will be a presence to support teachers and welcome children on Sunday mornings. I'm also in January appointing a search committee to look for a full-time director of education to oversee all education for children and also adults. This is, of course, finances permitting. Finally, I cannot close this topic without mentioning the powerful interplay between faith and music in the Anglican tradition. It is not an overstatement to say that Kevin Kwan and Marge Setnicki are two of the finest church musicians and teachers of children that I have ever met. Kevin's experience includes serving on the faculty of the prestigious St. Thomas Choir School in New York City. I dare any other parish in Virginia to offer a children's music program as exceptional as ours. And how sad, dear parents and grandparents, if you miss this opportunity. And I'm speaking as a parent and old enough to be a grandparent. Don't underestimate the power of sacred music to shape the lives and values of our children and open doorways and opportunities to the future as much as, and sometimes more, than academics and sports. As a parent who has a child who is an athlete and an academic. In conclusion, this is the Christ in St. Luke's moment. This is not just any time. This is the axial moment, I am convinced, that will determine whether this church will continue to grow and make an impact in its important mission to carry the best of the Anglican tradition into this community. I'm honored and excited to be your rector. I'm passionate about our mission, our values, and our vision, and I believe in the mission of our Anglican tradition of Christianity, quote, to seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving our neighbor as ourself, and to strive for justice and peace among all people, loving our neighbor as ourself, and through our worship, music, and life together, to create a world of wonder in which it is very easy to fall in love with God. And I yearn for our children to grow in this faith and live these values. Are you with me? Are you with me in your giving, your commitment, and your time? Or is this a spectator sport? You decide. If so, and if we are together, we have only just begun to take a great step into the future in a great church. Amen. I'll next call upon our treasurer to give a financial report.
Good morning. There is a handout with the financial information up here. If you haven't seen one, you can pick one up on the way out, or we can get you one. Wanted to give an update today on our operating budget. We really essentially have two sets of books, if you will. Our operating budget is the lifeblood of the parish. This is where our salaries for our staff and clergy are paid, utilities, our day-to-day programs. We do have another set of books, so to speak, that we call our restricted accounts, and those house very specific projects like the Water for Haiti or the choir trip, those kinds of things. So our update today is going to be on our operating budget. Our budget for 2014 was just over $991,000. So we are trending up every year. We did have an increase of pledges for 2014 over 2013, so it does allow us to grow. But as Wynn mentioned, we do still live a hand-to-mouth financial day-to-day, which is not that uncommon, but just to give you an overview of where we were as of October 31, the November financials will come out this week, but year-to-date, our expenses have exceeded our revenues by about $101,000. That seems like a big number, but it's kind of par for the course. It's a bigger number than last year, but we have a bigger budget this year. So to give you guys an idea of how our money and income and expenses work here, we typically every year see an influx of cash and revenue over our expenses, and it sits like that starting in January and stays like that till about the end of May, beginning of June. And then we take our summers off as Episcopalians. So we see this dip in revenue that sort of stays there, which is pretty average for a church. It stays there through the end of the summer. And for this congregation, it really goes into the fall. We like to go see our Monarchs play on Saturday. We have a great time tailgating, and sometimes we don't get up on Sunday and put our check in the plate. So we see that lull sort of stay there until November and December, and then we typically shoot up. It does make those 5 to 6 months interesting as far as getting through that. So I'm going to give some takeaways on that. But our total expenses this year are at 84% of the budget. And last year we were actually a little bit higher. We were closer to 90% of the budget. So again, while we're seeing that gap, we're actually better this year than we were last year, even though those numbers seem kind of big. The income, on the other hand, is a little bit behind last year. And there are some reasons for it. Our 3 biggest pledge gifts do come in a 1 lump sum, and they can come in at any time in the fall, anywhere between August and one of them usually comes in December. This time last year, that gift had already come in. It didn't come in until November this year. So again, these things sort of balance out, but it's all based on when money comes in as far as what the report looks like. So we also have a later Thanksgiving and a shorter Advent, so there's just a lot of things that sort of play into when money sort of hits the books. And y'all know how you are at home. I mean, I'm all of a sudden realizing what I haven't given or given to various organizations that I usually have at this time of year. So it all depends on how the calendar works. The 2 takeaways that I would share with you after reviewing this information is, number 1, please look at your pledge and where you are year to date. Pledge statements did go out last week. You should have all received them. If you haven't, please call the parish office and request it. Look it over, make sure it's accurate. If there's anything that doesn't seem right, let us know and we'll make sure that we get it corrected for you. But it is really important to us that you fulfill your pledge if you can. And we know sometimes things come up and you can't always meet the pledge that you thought a year ago you'd be able to provide. If you can't, just let us know that too, so that we can accommodate for that income not coming in. So please take a look at that. The other thing is that we have launched this year, and it's included on your pledge card for 2015, the option, should you choose to enroll in it, for auto debit. We can set up where the church will, in monthly equal installments, debit your pledge payment from your checking or savings account. It's optional, it's not required, but it really will help us with that lull that we see in the summer months. So if you're interested in that, you can check that option off on your pledge card, and Jane Dembert will mail you a form that you can enroll in that auto debit, and it will also outline how much your monthly installment will be and when it will start. If you don't start in January, that's okay. You can start at any time, and she'll prorate the monthly draft amount based on what your remaining pledge balance is due. Let's see, the other thing, I know we've got a stewardship report coming, but the pledged income report that I have is we're right at $630,000 for 2015, and that is about on trend where we were this time last year. And considering that we got a little bit of a later start with our stewardship program, I think that's actually pretty good. So, that is the summary of my report, unless there's any questions. Okay, if you do have questions, feel free to see me afterwards. If you ever want to see a copy of our budget or our financials, you are certainly welcome to them, and we'd be happy to provide you with those reports. Thank you.
Kelly has given basically the stewardship report. You can see the percentage of pledge cards in. I want to say two things about stewardship very quickly. First of all, Priscilla Rohde is our chair this year, and we need to give her a great round of thanks. Priscilla, and I didn't see Rob. Is Rob here? Anyway, if you have not pledged yet, you will receive a gentle reminder phone call. We're doing some phoning. The vestry is doing some phoning over the next few days. Please try to get them in so we can go ahead and make a budget for the next year. Many people are confused about pledging, and I was asked about this in the hallway just a second ago. So let me say that there are three things about pledging. One is some people don't pledge because they feel their income is erratic. Then I would suggest you make a lower pledge, and at the end of the year add to it if it's been a good year. Second, you can always, if things don't look good, you can always say, I can't fulfill my pledge. We build into the budget a buffer for unfulfilled pledges. The third thing is that you want to be noted as a pledger. That is vitally important in terms of serving as a leader if you ever are asked. But pledge at the lower end, but just pledge. Send that pledge card back. And even if you put 0, send the pledge card back. But if you put 0, put a little note, because otherwise I get paranoid that we've done something to offend you. Priscilla, anything else that you want to say?
The only thing that I would like to add is that you see from our displays in Impact 2015, we are trying to reach everybody. And if we do that personally, then we do it personally. And Rob, who's sitting back here.
Oh, Rob is here. Rob Blizzard.
Is here.
Great.
Rob has been a valuable asset, and he personally called, he with Linda, called probably at least 40 parishioners this past week who said thank you. And that's what we're trying to do. And I'm going to steal your words, Rob. We are friend raising as well as fundraising. And I'd like to stress that. And we're trying to accomplish receiving 100% return on the commitment cards, even if it is they can't. That's okay. We would like to get 100%. We're 60%. So we're going to work toward that.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. And Rob, would you let us offer our thanks to you? Rob Blizzard, Executive Director of the SPCA, a seasoned fundraiser, and he has jumped right in. Thank you, Rob. All right, then I'm going to turn this over to the trustees.
Our new vestry member, Bryant McGann, who's also a trustee of the endowment. I'm Brian McGann. I'm one of 3 trustees of your endowment. The other 2 trustees are Seeger Whitaker and Mary Beecham. I don't think Mary could be here. There she is. Okay. Well, if you have any questions, I will answer them. If you have any hard questions, Mary and Seeger will answer. How about that? This is always an exciting report. The 2 things I want to accomplish today, the first is obviously to give information about how the endowment has done financially and what it has done for the parish in the past 12 months. The second thing I'm sensitive to is the fact that because of the timing of this meeting, there might be some people here who have not been at past meetings and there also might be a lot of people who hear about the endowment once a year. So what I'd like to do is to perhaps educate you a little bit about what the endowment is about, because I think it's going to take a higher profile in the future. Wynn has some ideas, and I think you'll be hearing a lot more about planned giving from a committee to be formed. For those of you who don't know anything about the endowment, about 50 years ago, some far-sighted members of the parish set up a trust fund to be used for the capital maintenance and improvement of our buildings. Over the years, a couple of other buckets of money have been added to the trust fund, and so now we have actually 5 different funds, and there's also built into the trust agreement the opportunity for use of funds for other purposes. In the past year, the endowment had pretty good financial success, and sometimes I'm hesitant to put slides up on the screen, but this is a good visual for you all to take away. Last year, when I gave this report, the total value of the funds in the endowment were $2.75 million. This year, they're $2.95 million. The endowment, the total value of the endowment increased by about $200,000, and that's after having made distributions to the church. So that's a high-level takeaway. All I gotta do is figure out how to do this. Got it? Okay, financial performance. All right, most of the money in the endowment is invested in what's known as the composite fund, units in a composite fund, and these are the invested assets. And this slide shows the return over the past year, and year to date, and for the third quarter, and for the past 5 years. Year to date, we're up 9%. I'm sorry, for the past year, we're up 9%. Year to date, 3.2%. The third quarter, now this is ending September 30, 2014, we're down 1.14%. I think that the main thing to take away from this is that we are meeting or exceeding our benchmark of a blended investment portfolio approach. And I'll talk a little bit more about some things that we've been doing this year to make sure that the return is managed properly. Asset allocation, if you're interested in some detail, as of September 30, 63%, the portfolio was invested 63% in equities, 23% fixed income, 5% real estate, 5.5% tangible assets, and the rest in cash, tangible assets being commodities. I will mention that at the end of the second quarter, on June the 30th, we actually had 70% of the assets invested in equities, and we suggested to our financial advisor that they take a look at that and ratchet that back. And I think as a result of that, and also perhaps a drop in the equity market, we're down to 63%, which I will tell you is historically even a little bit higher than we normally see. So we're keeping an eye on that. Let me see here. Okay, here are individual fund balances. I'm going to talk a little bit about each fund. The Christian Ed Fund is a fund that's set up to fund Christian education in the church. Typically, the money available from that fund is plugged into the church's budget. Keep in mind that the trust was amended a couple of years ago, and what we do is we take 4% of the funds in a particular fund, the funds available in any particular fund, and those funds are available at the request of the vestry for use for the stated purpose of the fund. So, for example, Christian Ed Fund, the funds available would be 4% of the, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that, I'll talk about that. Essentially the $221,000 number. It's actually, the 4% is calculated on a trailing 12-quarter average. COT Fund is used it's used by the clergy to help the needy, parishioners and non-parishioners, and the trustees will make those funds available upon request of the rector and approval of the senior warden. Endowment fund is the sort of the big fund that we all think about when we think about the endowment. These are the funds that are available for the capital improvement, for maintenance of our buildings, and also for acquisition of computers and software. And you will hear a little bit later that we did use a substantial amount of the funds available for computer upgrades, acquisition, and I think for the website upgrades that Gwen talked about. Rectory fund. The Rectory fund represents, the funds in the Rectory fund are available for use by church clergy for housing. Typically, we have loaned those funds to the clergy. We get a note, we take a lien on the house. Right now, we don't have any loan of that type, and so that fund, fortunately, has done very well and is growing. The Tucker Fund is a fund that was established, I don't know, a decade ago, and it is available for use for new programs. All right, this is the wrong chart. Seeger picked this up last night, and I apologize. But the takeaway from this is after distributions, which were actually not $87,000, that's the number that will be available this year. After distributions of $73,000, the rest of the numbers are right. After distributions of $73,000 to the church for the purposes that I just mentioned, $44,000 in fees, about 0.16%, 160 basis points. Even after that, those distributions, the aggregate portfolio grew, as you saw from the first slide, to $2.95 million, over 7%, even after distributions.
Right, but you don't mention the Selden Fund.
The Selden Fund is not covered by this trust, and I'm not prepared to give a report on the Selden Trust, because we don't manage the Selden Trust. Bank of America is the trustee on the Selden Trust. And I could be happy to do that at some other time or answer questions offline about the Selden Trust, what's in it, and what it's been used for.
It has to do with the maintenance of the Selden Chapel.
Yeah, there was a trust set up for the maintenance of Selden Chapel, separate, totally separate from this trust, and that's managed by, and the trustee is Bank of America. All right, let's see. Cost of management, we're always looking at the cost of management. And here's some basic numbers. Be happy to answer more about this, but the costs have been increasing as a percentage. We try to manage it the best we can. We are constantly thinking about alternatives to the way we invest the funds. But right now, I think it's fair to say that we are happy with the performance, and also the way these funds are set up takes a fair amount of special handling, and there are not a lot of other alternatives that we think will work as smoothly as what we have now set up with U.S. Trust. I don't know, Seeger or Mary, if you want to say anything about that.
I want to say something about the way you calculated the numbers, okay?
Uh-oh.
Use the mic, Mary, please.
Sure. Can you go back to the cost slide? Since someone spoke to me already and said that seems like a lot, I wanted to point out that when we look at amounts that you pay an investment management team, such as U.S. Trust, very often you would see that as just what you pay U.S. Trust. We are also including an approximation of what went to mutual fund managements within the portfolio. So often if you're just looking at what you pay a registered investment advisor, you may not be seeing that number, but you're seeing it because Bryant is obsessive compulsive about fees.
Yeah, U.S. Trust and Bank of America are very patient with me. And, and the other thing, as I said, there were also some fees built in there for, we have transfers every quarter, and there's some special handling that goes on the way this is set up. And so we keep an eye on it, but we think that for the time being, that's fair. All right. As I said before, what we do, the way the trust is set up, 4% of the amount of the funds in a given fund are available for distribution during the year. And this chart shows what's going to be available for 2015 from each fund. One thing I would mention for anybody who is paying attention or who cares is these numbers are calculated based on a 12-month rolling average. We have been fortunate in a sense for the past couple of years in that the quarters that have rolled off were very, go back to the Great Recession, and so they were low. So then you would take that off, and then you'd add the newest quarter where there had been a great deal of appreciation, so that the amount of funds available was increasing at a good clip. Now we're in a situation where the quarters that are rolling off aren't quite so bad, and so the amount available from these funds is going to stabilize going forward. I hope that makes sense. The bottom line is there's $7,500 more available this year than there was last year. Okay. Let's see, I have those come, but I'm going to give you some. Mary and Seeger, y'all will obviously jump in here. Needs that got funded this year included a consultant for building renovations. As I said, fair amount of money for computer acquisition and conversion and the website. Renovations to the Children's Chapel. If you haven't seen those, you should take a look at them. Sound system, roof repair. And another thing I'd like to emphasize is I'm personally really excited because when the trustees had a meeting with Ray, and it looks to me like we're going to be using funds going forward for actual improvements to the church property. I've been involved with church finances and this endowment for a long time, and it's one of the first times that the funds have not been absolutely earmarked for urgent deferred maintenance. And so I'm really, really excited that these funds could be used for
Why aren't there distributions from the rectory fund?
Okay, the rectory fund, thank you for the question. The rectory fund represents the proceeds from the rectory. The church used to own a house that the clergy lived in. And the house was sold, I forgot, it was on Moody Arch, wasn't it?
Well, no, this one was the one that Peter.
Oh, okay, that's at Claremont and Brandon then.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, represents the, so that's where that money came from. Church used to own that property, and it was sold. So now the money sits there, and it's not distributed, it's available for use for housing. And what we have typically done is made low interest loans to clergy, frankly, might not, either couldn't afford a conventional loan or needed a little bit of help and that kind of thing. Right now, I think we loaned $1,000 to Grant for his down payment for his apartment. So that's
And Kathy and I, when we refused that, so it's available for an assistant if we need.
so if Grant wanted to buy a house, for example.
Yeah, not for an assistant's salary, but to help with living. Grant, can I say one more thing? Regarding the sound system, $10,000 was a gift, but it cost $12,000, and so the extra $2,000 was picked up by the endowment. I think it sounds a little better now, doesn't it?
Yes.
Right, I'll leave you with this. We've had some inquiries recently from some parishioners about contributing to the endowment, and I've been dealing with this I've been pretty close to this for a long time. So I'm not sure what the average parishioner knows about the endowment. To me, I'm thinking if I was sitting where you are, it might be this strange thing over here that's very complicated. Really, it's very simple. So if you have any, you're going to be hearing more about the endowment, and we're always available to answer questions about it. It's not something to be intimidated by, and once you boil it down, it's pretty darn simple. So
In the beginning, when you started, people died, and so people wanted to send a gift, and they went to the endowment fund. And there were several funds like that that came in and went to the endowment. That's really how it started.
thanks, Freddie. Did everybody hear that? He said it was set up, and then some people died, and they wanted to leave money to the endowment, and that's how it was funded. And again, we're going to hear. I will tell you that for the past couple of years, in this the wilderness, perhaps that Wynn alluded to, the church potentially had different priorities. But again, we've been receiving more inquiries from some generous parishioners about how to give and what would happen, and that's very exciting, and you're going to be hearing more about that.
Thank you to the trustees. Brian, that was excellent. We'll have some more questions in a minute. I could not include everything in my verbal report, but there will be a written report that includes some more things that will be going out at the end of the week. One of them will talk about planned giving. There is a planned giving association here called the Heath Light Society, but we decided to work on really rebuilding transparency and trust regarding our finances, and then move back into the planned giving options. And Bryant and Marion Seeger have done a tremendous job working to rebuild that trust and transparency with the endowment, and I thank you all very much for that. Organ Committee.
Good morning or good afternoon. When I came here 2 years ago, I really saw it as my responsibility to be the chief steward of this magnificent instrument that we have had entrusted to our care. And so to that end, I commissioned a report from a leading organ builder to just tell us what we have, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this is a summary of his report that I and the organ committee, chaired by John Ford, has reviewed. There will be a fuller presentation that will be given on January 11th. And so if you don't get all your questions answered today, there will be a fuller presentation. What is the role of our pipe organ? The organ is an integral part of our worship as a parish and as a leader of diocesan services. It has been the foundation of our music program for over 50 years, and the instrument is used very much so by arts organizations around the community, including the Virginia Chorale today, the Williams School on Thursday, the Virginia Arts Festival uses it every year. We have a lot of people using the organ. The current organ was built in 1963 by the Casavan Organ Company of Canada. It was enlarged and partially renovated in 1997 by the Laterno Organ Company. Gravity, the lack of temperature and moisture control, and the deterioration of the chambers have taken a great toll. And it is now time to take corrective action before things get worse. And so what follows are some slides and some pictures that will show you the current state of the organ. What are the issues? Safe and proper access. As you can see, access to the chamber over the chapel is by this freestanding and somewhat unstable ladder. If you're afraid of heights, forget it. Once you're inside the main chamber, it is very tight, and as you can see, this is a wall right here, and here are some pipes, and I myself cannot actually go through straight without turning my body. And so that's how tight the access is in the main chamber. Yes. The conditions of the chamber have deteriorated over time. This is a picture of the roof in the chapel, and 6 months ago this piece of insulation was intact, and when we went up 2 weeks ago it has started to fall in, and so that will probably fall any day now. Debris is located throughout the chambers from deterioration and from previous water damage. We think right now that there is actually no current water damage, and all of the water damage is from the past, but we're not quite sure. As this picture shows, there's something going on up there. This is the window in the chapel chamber. That is the chamber above Selden Chapel. That's what I mean by the chapel chamber. And it has a single pane glass right here and a torn piece of plastic sheeting with all this broken glass right here. Now these look like, pretty simple repairs, but when you're talking about a 20-foot window that's 20 feet up in the air, it gets a little bit more complicated. And so a lot of the maintenance has just been Band-Aids to kind of keep it going. Here's a better picture of the window. It's a large window with the plastic sheeting. You can see here that the electronics of the organ, the computer of the organ, has been placed on this exterior wall where water has leaked, and so that is really not an ideal place to place that. Due to lack of proper access, only makeshift repairs have been possible. This is a wind chest that is connected to the wall, and you see this rotted piece of wood right here. Pieces of duct tape. This is a bowed pipe that has been just taped with duct tape to kind of keep it going. And here's a picture of more water damage on the side of the chamber, or possibly termite damage. Debris has started to, I think it's just called effervescence. It's bubbling up to the surface, and you can see that it's starting to fall on the open pipes. So that's on the chapel side. The chambers are quite overcrowded. Most organs are pretty tight, but this one's very tight. There are approximately 3,500 pipes that are placed in very confined spaces, making access very difficult for tuning and for repairs. These pictures show the swell chambers, which is actually two of the roomier chambers of the organ. And due to overcrowding, pipes get damaged. You see, it's very faint here, but there's a brown ladder that is the main ladder going up into what we call the swell chamber. And anytime you walk on that ladder, this pipe is pushed in. And it's not because of how many cookies the tuner ate that day. It is physically impossible not to touch that pipe, with your backside, because it's just of where it's placed. And these pipes, the same thing. You can kind of see there are some bends and some dings to these pipes, which of course, pipes speak because of their size and because of how they're shaped, and if you kind of push one in, they'll make a different sound, not necessarily a good one. Lack of access has prevented us from fixing this pipe. This is one of the tallest facade pipes, and you can see the solder and the scroll right here, but we cannot even get to that pipe right now, and so this has been kind of just a makeshift solution. Metal fatigue is an important issue that we have discovered in the past 20 years. These pipes were made out of a material called spotted metal, which is a very heavy material. And you can see that over 17 years, these pipes have started to bow due to all of this weight on the top. You see here's another bendy pipe, and it should be a straight up pipe, just like this one. But they're all starting to bow because of the weight over time. And this is probably the most telling picture. It's a comparison of this pipe, which should be straight up like the ones next to it. This was taken in 2013, and 2 weeks ago it had fallen completely. So obviously that pipe no longer works, and the other ones are going as well. That's my head right there. Problems that we can't see. We've seen a lot of pipes, but there are also thousands of other parts that organs have. Leathers is one of them. Small individual leather pouches allow air to flow into the pipe. And these leathers are mostly now over 50 years old, and that's just about the lifespan of these leathers, and they need to be replaced. Wiring is also something that needs to be replaced. In the past, lightning strikes have kind of killed the organ, and we need to upgrade to a fiber optic network. So what needs to be done? We need to dismantle the organ for a complete overhaul. This includes a thorough cleaning, replacement of collapsed and damaged pipes, rebuilding or replacing the wind chests, which are the lungs of the organ, great big wooden boxes that carry the air, upgrade to new wiring, and refurbish the organ chambers, the actual rooms that the organ sits in, and add proper insulation, lighting, and repainting. A possible solution that we are investigating is to relieve overcrowding by adding another chamber behind this wall. This is the chamber on the eagle side, on top of the organ console, and this window right here is bricked in, or kind of there's a stone face right here. But behind this window is the music library on the stage of the Children's Chapel, and that is a possible solution for moving some of the big pipes from this existing chamber and from the other side into this chamber, so that access will be much more easy in the main chambers. That is something that we are investigating right now. And this could look like what you see in the back of the church. There are two windows like this in the back of the church that have pipes in them, and with dummy pipes, we call them facade pipes. And we could possibly match that on this side. Now you may say, the organ sounds just fine to me. And well, as a musician and as an organist, Marge and I, it's our job to make the organ sound as good as possible. And each week we tend to find something that may be a little bit wrong with the organ, and so we just have to work around it. And if I'd be happy to show you individually some problems. If it's most easy to see when you're at the organ. We are living on borrowed time, and now is the time to restore the organ for future generations. This is not uncommon. This is pretty much a normal time frame. 50 years is about the time. But we've had more against us because of the conditions of The Hague and the water outside and the flooding and that has really beat down on the chambers and has kind of made the deterioration even more quick. And so, as I said, a full presentation will be given on January 11th. So we do hope that you join us then. Thank you very much.
I will say that I appreciate the work of the organ committee, which has been working very hard, and we already, as Ray will bring out, have some potential donors to get us started. There's so much I could say about Ray Gindros, our senior warden. One thing is he's willing to serve as senior warden a second year, for which I am immensely grateful. But given the press of time, I'll just simply say thanks be to God for Ray, our senior warden, Ray Gindros.
Thank you, Ren. It's been an enormous pleasure to serve as senior warden this year. I'd like to recognize the outgoing members of the vestry who are here, the people with whom I'm served. Angelica Light over here. I know
Will
Tobin.
you come forward?
Come forward.
Yeah.
Tobin Palmer in the back, our junior warden. I'm not seeing very well. Are there any other outgoing vestry members? Oh yes, Leanne Avery is coming up, being coaxed up. Come on up, Leanne. And
Mike McClellan.
Mike McClellan, who is He was in church.
He was
Saw him in
here.
church.
He was in the back, but I think he had.
Okay, well, so imagine the image of Mike McClellan standing up front. We'd very much like to thank these wonderful people for outstanding service on the vestry. I'd like to talk about a way forward for us with some of these challenges that have been articulated by Wynn, by Kevin, by Kelly, that we as a parish face and which we need to now move forward on and conquer. I'd like to begin by looking first at 2014, which I can only characterize as being a very, 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 very busy year for this parish. Many people in the parish, and certainly those of us on the vestry, felt that the most important priority for 2014 was to get Wynn to settle down and to become our settled rector. So with great joy, we participated in all the processes for that. So let's congratulate Wynn one more time. But I would prefer to say let's congratulate the parish for keeping Wynn here, because many... Now, the parish survey, which was run by Rod Ingram and Angelica Light and others, was, I think, an important moment in the history of the church, because it was at Wynn's insistence that there be a rigorous evaluation of where the church stood at this point in time and his role in it. And it was perhaps probably the most positive affirmation of not only Wynn, but the directions of the church that anyone had ever seen, and certainly more than we expected. So that was an important work item in the year. We have seen increased attendance, and certainly attendance at some of the public performances is just quite overwhelming now. Even songs are almost standing room only. Wynn spoke about the transitions and changes in staffing and in leadership here, and I can't emphasize enough the importance of having a strong leader like Wynn and other members of the team to carry us through these periods of change. Change, as he said, is sometimes a shock to the system. If handled well, it can lead to very good things. We're in the middle of a stewardship campaign, which we saw as an important moment. People have already been beating this horse to death, but I'm going to beat it a little bit more. And that is, please, for yourselves and for others, if you haven't gotten your pledge in, please get it in. It's very difficult to plan without it. And if there's some way you can increase your pledge, please do so for that. This is an important moment for us. The children's education program, Wynn described in great detail. And we were very exciting to watch it happen in the course of the spring term. Outreach has been exciting for me to watch here. I don't know whether many of you know that the paintings that line the corridor outside Lloyd Hall are painted by homeless people who are here during the week on Thursday, and Jim Bickford took the lead to add that to the experience of being here. So there's some spiritual and fulfilling aspect to coming here. And also they're very beautiful works of art, I think, clearly influenced by Jim's approach to painting, which I think is part of the strength of the program. Sacred music in a sacred space has been talked about a great deal. We had a second round of the DOT exercise, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more. And the organ committee, I must say, has been an extraordinary force of nature to work with. They have extraordinary enthusiasm and gusto and ability to move forward. I want to go back in time a little bit. But before I do that, I want to make it clear what the wardens, it's plural. Sorry, I've got it in the wrong place. The apostrophe is supposed to be after the X, not before the S. Thought I'd change that. Anyway, and I take it to mean the whole vestry, not just the junior warden and senior warden. Is to keep the roof intact. This is from the canons, not verbatim, but my paraphrasing it. Keep the roof intact, the water out, the spaces warm, the finances sound, or in other words, keep the parish afloat, and to maintain order and discipline during the services. Now, you may notice there are two staffs out in the, and I'm happy to report that the wardens have not been called upon to use those staffs in the course of 2014, but there better not be any lax behavior, because the staffs are always there. The property committee is a very active group of people, each of whom take on different tasks to perform. I owe a great debt of gratitude to our outgoing junior warden, Tobin Palmer, whose calm, even demeanor in the face of leaking pipes and collapsing roofs manages to help everybody find effective solutions. So thank you, Tobin, very much. So the property committee plugged many leaks. Please notice that it's in blue. Repaired heating systems, conducted analyses of various problems, repaired structure, implemented the results of the DOT process, both from 2013 and 2014. And I can't say enough about Susan Naga Khan and her ability to get things organized. Now, I'm going to take you back a little bit in time, because as we move forward, I think it's important to look at what has been accomplished in the last couple of years. You know, we have this process of engaging the whole parish using dots, which I like to call dotocracy, as a method of moving forward, in which you use words and green dots to describe strengths, words and red dots to describe problems, words and blue dots to describe solutions, as a way of determining our priorities for the future. In 2013, that produced a shopping list. Now, I may have told you this before, but when I proposed that we look at this as a shopping list, I didn't really mean that people would buy things. I put it down as a method of having everybody help us determine priorities on how to spend money that we had. However, one member of the parish asked at the beginning if we had the money, and I had to admit we didn't. And she said, well, this looks like a bridal registry. And 10 minutes later, we had an auction. And 20 minutes later, we'd raised $30,000. And by the end of the week, we had $75,000. So that there was a restoration fund created. And that produced the items you see up there, the exterior of this building, the garden, an entry from Stockley Gardens, the transformation of the corridors, the new office for Grant, lighting in the Litchgate and Stockley Garden area, which now is working, I'm happy to say. The railings up to the choir, and welcoming signs, so you would know that this was in fact an Episcopal church that you could enter. And then there was a series, these were all short-term objectives. There was another list of bigger efforts having to do with the overall form of the building, the lack of space, the lack of appropriate education space, the lack of enough gathering spaces, which were too much to consider at the time being, and so it became a list of large items for the future. 2014, we conducted the DOT exercise again. And this time, we got a refined shopping list for the use of available funds. We chose not to have an auction this time, but began the process of looking at the unspent balance from the restoration fund, because more had been raised than we used in 2013, and a process with the trustees, as Bryant referred to, in which we develop shopping lists, get it to the finance committee and the trustees in advance so that we can have some level of predictability for using an income from the endowment that is not used at the end of a quarter for emergency funds. And this is a process which we now are determined to implement more effectively as we move forward. The endowment limits the purposes for which we can use these funds. I mean, it's not terribly narrow, but it is in a very specific range. And it has to be for things related to capital improvements rather than operations and even general maintenance. So we got the shopping list, and to everyone's great delight, I remember there was an absolutely uproarious set of cheers in church on the Sunday that Wynn announced that the bathrooms had been painted. It seems like a wonderful thing to celebrate. The stair rail, which was one of the top items going up to the children's area and down to the choir, has been installed. We reworked the Bosaban entry. The new children's program needed a youth lounge. That was done in record time over the summer, thanks to the leaders of that program and to the marvelous project management ability of Molly McCune. In blue are things which are going to happen in the first quarter of 2015 to reconfigure rooms on the top floor to make a more effective use of that space and to get some storage. And the bottom one has been incredibly well implemented particularly under the leadership of both Susan Nagar Khan and our Sexton David, to organize something that seemed unorganizable. It used to be a terrifying experience to open one of those doors down there and see what was growing inside and threatening to come out and swallow you up. But anyway, it's getting beautifully organized. And we had a little peek at some long-term needs, and there was a consensus in a meeting in February on a method of thinking about moving forward in the future with a replacement for Lloyd Hall. But once again, we don't have a specific program for it quite yet. I think that's one of the things that we'll be looking at in terms of overall needs this year, and it's something that was still seemed a bit in the future. Well, you never know what's going to happen. You know, in a sense, this list of small items is something that we've been pretty effective at doing, but we're running out of small things. You know, we're putting off the big questions. But sometimes fate intervenes in a Beethoven-like fashion, and one of them is this evaluation of the organ, which clearly, as you can see from Kevin's presentation, is a serious matter that has some urgency. It's not going to collapse tomorrow by any means, but I think his paraphrasing it as living on borrowed time is an extremely effective way of describing it. Now, Kevin brilliantly described some of the issues with the organ itself. He also alluded to the fact that many of the problems come from the conditions of the chambers. So that means that there are architectural changes that have to take place to accommodate that, like a new chamber for the organ, and certainly mechanical and structural and electrical items will go with that. But there's another thing. This church space and the organ are really a unit. In all of the dot processes, the most treasured part of this church complex is that worship space and that organ. It was a forest of green dots, a few tiny little red dots which need to be fixed, but a forest of green dots. And there are problems with the building as well, building envelope, as well as with the organ. Certain things are flaking, roofs still leak, the stone needs to be cleaned. Occasionally the wood floor collapses. Now, I don't mean to suggest that you're going to go down into the basement when the wood floor collapses. The wood floor is about 3 or 4 inches above the structural floor on sleepers. But when the wood goes in, that means that people are tripping and it becomes somewhat of a hazard. It's known on the property committee as the squishy floor syndrome. But sometimes it becomes worse than that. The stained glass windows on the upper level need to be evaluated and repaired. It has not, the lower windows have been well taken care of, but the upper ones have not. Everyone's favorite thing to complain about are the pews and the kneelers. They need to be reworked. Floor needs to be refinished. There are wonderful things that can be done with lighting, not only for performance and for the choir, but also to celebrate the architecture more. And then cleaning and stone repair. Now, all of these items need to be done when the organ is not there. Because when the organ is worked on, it goes away. And it's a very sensitive, temperamental thing, an organ. It's an organist. And so, while it's away, all the things that generate sawdust and dirt and dust and let soot in from the outside and all this moisture, we can't do them with the organ here. So repairing refurbishing and expanding the organ is tied to the architectural improvements and restoration of the worship space itself. It's a package that needs to be done together. Now, we have received, the church has received some, people have come forward offering some significant financial support for the organ without being asked and without the program being announced. So we know, and the organs typically are the kind of thing that's supported in part by large gifts from individuals. This is an historic building. There is an historic tax credit program, which could represent 25%. By the time you do all the paperwork, it's 20%, but could be 20% of the cost of what this is. Some people say 18%. We're shooting for 20% as a method of doing it. So there are a few more challenges ahead of us. We're continuing the small ongoing renovation of the parish house, but next year we start thinking of the ground floor, which gets us into somewhat difficult territory because it will affect future flexibility of the complex. We have talked about additional construction. We don't have an elevator. Shame on us. We need better entry space. We need additional spaces of all kinds, especially small meeting space now that the parish is expanding. And then there is the idea of a replacement for Lloyd Hall. The Bossvan property across the street is another asset that we have that we're not using. What should we go there? We don't know. There is this little question of parking. Our visitor, or distinguished visitor this morning, asked if we had a parking lot, and Ben and I broke out laughing because we're not allowed. Technically, we don't have a parking lot. We're parking on a front yard across the street. And there have been many people interested in making improvements to the Litchgate Garden. It's a lot. It's really a lot to think about. So how can we handle all this? Because what I've put up here, I don't know whether you can see it, is those numbers from the items we just looked at in their colors are for the worship space and organ work, parish house, the potential of a new addition, the Bossvan lot, and flood protection, which is going to increasingly become an issue. Jake Tobin, my illustrious predecessor as senior warden, on whom I've relied heavily, by the way, as someone at the other end of a phone or over a cup of coffee, Jake found the map that showed that we were built on a lake, on a river, and it was all filled. Glenn Scott once called it the revenge of Scott's Creek when it floods and comes back. And so, as you know, there's great interest in the city in this. It has an impact on what we do in the future. The zoning has changed now, and so we cannot build habitable space lower than the level of the parish house, the main level of the parish house, which is about 7 or 8 feet above the sidewalk level out at Stockley Gardens, because it goes down. What we can do is put parking down there and build it as a kind of tank to contain the water, and it may be part of a flood solution, and there may be funding for that, because we'd be affecting the larger area with it. And then some people come forward with an interest in Litchgate Gardens. Well, how do we handle all this? I would propose, and here's the reason I dragged you back through 2013 and 2014 process, I would propose that we continue the same kind of process of engaging the parish and everybody who's willing to participate in the planning, design, and setting priorities. And in January, on the 11th, will be the presentation of the organ and a few other matters. On the 25th, we'll have a second session where we'll ask everybody to sit around tables and debate the priorities. What goes first? What do we need to focus on now? What do we do to move forward? So that we can develop an overall strategy. That will help us continue to develop shopping lists. Now, the shopping lists we've been working so far have been with items like this, right? Now we're looking at items like this. It's the same thing, they're just bigger pieces. So we just need to think of it that way. And then provide a clear funding strategy for each step in the process so everybody knows how we move forward. In order to do that, there is one absolutely essential thing that we need to have. And that is a long-range master plan for how these individual pieces fit together into a strategy. So we take little bites, but we know those little bites are going towards a certain vision, a certain future, and a particular vision. We also need, for the architectural work related to the organ, to bring an architect on board. And we've begun the process of searching for architects, and it's a particular group we're looking for, who have extensive experience in a combination of restoration and new construction attached to restoration. Church, especially Episcopal church, but at least church experience in dealing with parish houses and worship space and the relationship between them, and working in an historic district. All three of those things are clearly levels of experience that we need to have. Now, when we were talking about it the last time, when we did the dots, we asked you for criteria for developing such a plan, and you all said, let's engage the community and the city in the process of developing a plan. Absolutely essential. Now, the master plan has several other functions besides guiding us. You may recall that in the Second Century campaign and in the presentation that I did in February, one of the key issues were zoning regulations and limits for the percentage of coverage. I met with the Department of City Planning, and the director recommended a different procedure, which is a plan development, a PD, HCPD. It's a Historic Conservation Plan Development. So that if you cooperatively develop a plan with the community and with the city and the whole parish, and that becomes, in diagrammatic terms, the plan, then any future proposals are measured against that plan instead of against arbitrary zoning regulations. And so the effort will be to get everybody on board and have a shared vision for what's to be done with these properties. Secondly, if we do go for historic tax credits, it's going to be a factor in, they won't issue them unless you have a master plan of this sort that shows how other things relate to the preservation of the historic building that you're working on. And finally, I always view master plans as being economic flypaper. It attracts investment that sticks to it. It's part of any kind of fundraising or campaign for it. What are the next steps? We've established a steering committee of people involved in these different efforts to coordinate how they all fit together. We will have parish-wide workshops in January, and we hope in that process to determine at least a preliminary view of what the priorities and phasing would be. We are continuing to research, design, and find funding for the organ, which that committee is doing. The architectural group is trying to research consultants and get that going. And we hope to begin in the spring of the term of 2015 a master planning process with the engagement of parish, community, city, and relevant agencies. Please join us on what I think will be a wonderful and exciting journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you've been very patient. Thank you, Ray. What a treasure Ray Gindros is in our parish. You've been very patient. So if you need to leave at this point, you are welcome to leave. No one will feel insulted. But we did want to vet any burning questions, and then these reports will be present both in video and in writing, available to you and sent out on your e-tower or available on the website. So you will get some, and as I said, some of these will be expanded a bit in writing. But questions for anyone? Yes, Emily.
What plan do you have to get people into this building who need wheelchairs?
Handicapped accessible. Ray, you want to answer that?
Yes, it's a very big issue. We are in violation of the principles. We're not legally in violation because we've been grandfathered. I guess that's an expression we could use. Historic buildings are not, it's not enforced. But it's absolutely critical, and I think the most challenging single part of what we need to do is figure out where to put an elevator. Because the location of that elevator will have a fundamental impact on any future that we have. We had a hope this year through the architect Robin Thomas that we're working with that there may be a way to sneak a little one in the existing building, but we gave up, didn't work. And so that means it will be a separate structure that will have to be attached to the building. It's a significant expense. And one option that we had looked at last February was to have an intermediate phase in which there was an addition that only dealt with entry and handicap access for it. And it would be located not between Lloyd Hall and the Parish House, but just to the side of it in that location. It's a very tricky question. It gets even trickier with the flood regulations. Because we would like to have it come down to the grade, but then that's in the flooded area. You could do it by getting all the equipment up in the air, but it means that sometimes your lower lobby is underwater. So you hose it out and you're all right, I guess. But yes, that's a top priority. Any other questions?
Let us stand and sing. Could one of our choir members start us, maybe Melissa, in the doxology as our closing? Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen.
Do I hear a motion that we conclude this meeting? Sine die.
So moved.
Second? All those in favor? Aye. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Alleluia, alleluia.
Thanks be to God.